So I thank the organizer for invitation. I often come to Korea. Actually, so these 3 years I spent more than 1 month in Seoul, but this is the first time to come to Daejeon and KAIST. I'm enjoying my stay very much. So thank you. So this is joint work with Makoto Sakuma in Hiroshima University. It's a kind of the work in progress. But, so let me begin with with explaining some background and motivation of this work. So it has this work has started with the Sakuma's work with Dongyi Lee on the two-bridge Lie complement. So more previously to that, there's work with Otsuki and Riley and Sakuma, and on the epimorphisms of between the two-bridge link groups. So that is something like that. So if you have two-bridge link is something like this. You have two trivial tangles, and they are connected by some twisting in between. So you have here you have a 4 times punctured sphere, and by mapping cross group on that surface, you can twist these curves, and then you can connect the two trivial tangles by some twisting here. And what you get is something called a two-bridge link. Okay? Right? So the complement of this link is 3-manifold with torus boundary, or maybe the two torus boundaries. And so you consider the fundamental group of the complement. That's what we denote by G of K R or G of K. So our prime is a rational number corresponding to the it is calculated using the number of twists. So I don't want to get into detail of this one, but you can parameterize the two-bridge links by using rational number, and it corresponds to a continuum fraction of these numbers. So they show that there is a kind of they constructed epimorphisms from some two-bridge link complement two-bridge link group G of Kr to G of Kr prime systematically. And in the process of doing that, they used some fact concerning the curves on this surface. Curves on this surface is called the Conway surface. So they gave a kind of criterion for curves on the Conway surface to be non-homotopy in the knot complement. And so the Sakuma noticed that in the process of proving this theorem, what is more important is the following problem. So how can we characterize the simple cause curve on the Conway surface? In the surface, it's 4 times punctured sphere, which are non-homotopic in the complement. So there's one line below that.
Can you read from the back?
Yes.
The characterization.
Oh, read on the back?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So, Dongyi Lee and Sakuma have succeeded in getting such a criterion, the complete criterion or complete characterization of the curves, or typical curves on the Conway sphere to be non-homotopic in the link complement. So this kind of world, this is a very concrete object, which is so the two links are very concrete objects, and it's a kind of very special thing to deal with. But you can easily generalize that. Well, we can imagine that such a kind of problem can exist also for n-bridge non-ring complement, or more general, the Heegaard surface, or bridge decomposition or something like that. So that what we'd like to consider next is the Heegaard surface, Heegaard splitting. So there is very there are very relevant problems in the field of Heegaard splitting, which is posed by Minsky. So we consider Heegaard splitting. Heegaard splitting is splitting up the three-man body into two Handel bodies. So here M is a three-man pod, closed three-man pod, and it is composed into two Handel bodies. That the Heegaard splitting. So H1 and H2 are two Handel bodies. So S here is the surface which is shared by these two Handel bodies. So the surface S, and around S, two Handel bodies are pasted together, and you get three-man body. And you consider a subgroup of the mapping class group, so which denoted by GJ here. That's a subgroup consisting of the homomorphism of H sub J, which are homotopic to the identity. So for instance, if you consider meridian or compressing disk in a Handel body, and you cut the Handel body along that disk and twist the disk by 360 degrees and paste it back, then you get some homomorphism of a Handel body, but it's homotopic to the identity, because the fundamental group of the Handel body is just the free group, and it doesn't act, it acts trivially on that Handel group, so it's homotopic to the identity. So you have such kind of subgroup. So that's denoted by GJ. Okay. So Minsky's asked something like that. Because you have two Handel bodies, you have one such subgroup G1 and on the side of H1, and the other subgroup G2 on the side of H2. So both of them can be regarded as subgroups of the mapping class group of the Heegaard surface S. Okay. So the first problem is something like that. So when the intersection of these two groups, the G1, G2, is finite. Okay. And actually the Hossan Namaji showed that this intersection is actually finite if the Hempel distance is large enough. Well, the Hempel distance is something like that. So if you H1 and H2 has a system of meridians, or a set of meridians, and their boundaries are regarded as a simple curve on the Heegaard surface. So there is a set of meridians of H1 and a set of meridians for H2. And the Heegaard distance is the minimum distance between these two subsets of the curve complex. So on the curve complex, you measure the distance between the two meridians, and if you consider the minimum, then that's a Heegaard distance. So the Namaji showed that if the Heegaard distance or Hempel distance is
which is the right one?
Both are right actually. The Heegaard distance or Hempel distance. Well, either is okay. So if the Hempel distance, well, let me say Hempel distance. So the Hempel distance is large enough, then actually this intersection is finite. So the second problem posed by the Minsky is the following. So the set of the curves, simple curves on S, which are not homotopic in M, coincides with this. So here, the delta 1 is the set of the meridians of H1, and the delta 2 is the set of meridians of H2. And you translate, you consider all the translates of this set by the group generated by G1 and G2. Okay. So it's easy to see that any curve contained in that set is not homotopic because any curve in here is not homotopic, and or any element in G1 or G2 preserves the non-homotopicity of if the something is non-homotopic, it's imaged by G1 or G2 again non-homotopic. So it's easy to see that any curve in this set is non-homotopic, but the problem is converse. So it is conjecture that this should be true if the Hempel distance is large enough again. So it's an open problem, but he conjectured that this should be true. So now, let me compare this problem with Sakuma's setting, and actually Sakuma already posed the similar problems with regard to bridge decomposition, which is a kind of the generalization or it's analog of the Heegaard split. So we consider n-bridge decomposition or Heegaard splitting anyway. When we say that some node has n-bridge decomposition, it means you have 2n times punctured sphere decomposing a link into two trivial tuples. Okay. So you consider a link complement and suppose it is an n-bridge decomposition. Okay. So the decomposition along the 2n times punctured sphere. And as in the two-bridge link case, we consider it's like in a Heegaard splitting case, you consider the subgroup of the mapping class group of the splitting surface, which consists of the homomorphism of the H1 or H2, which is homotopic to the unit. Okay. And as before, we consider the set of meridians. So that is the boundary of compressing disk in H1 or H2. So this is the situation of the n-bridge decomposition. Or you can consider, as before, you can consider the Heegaard splitting. These both are quite parallel. And the problem is like this. So that characterize the curves on S which are now homotopic in M. So that the second sentence is just the same as Minsky problem. So there's a set of curves not homotopic in M coincide with the translates of the set of meridians by the groups generated by G1 and G2. Okay. So again, we assume that Hempel distance is large enough. Well, if the Hempel distance is very small, well, they actually can't. Suppose the Hempel distance is large enough, then is it true? Not. That's a problem. And this was the first program by Sakuma. The second program with him is like this. So you can consider the action of the group, action of the mapping class group on the projective lamination space in general. And so any subgroup of mapping class group acts on the projective lamination space. And in our case, what we are interested in is the group generated by G1 and G2. So that group also acts on the projective major lamination space always. So it's a kind of completion of the set of simple closed curves on this. And the problem is that if this action have a domain of discontinuity, if the Hempel distance is large enough. So, well, this is kind of what we have in mind is that only the translate of the set of meridian is the kind of the limit set, and that complement should be domain of discontinuity. But more generally, the second problem is a more general one, and it asks if there is a non-empty domain of discontinuity or not. And the third problem is that actually this special case or the more concrete conjecture. So that it's the domain of discontinuity is the same as the curve, the homotopy curves. So if you have some domain of discontinuity, the third problem is asking, all curves there are non-homotopic in M. So the fourth problem is this. So is there any open set in projective lamination space in which no curves are not homotopic? So if the more ambitious conjecture is that these two sets are actually the same one. So the domain of discontinuity and is an open set. The domain of discontinuity coincide with the open set, such an open set. So the open set consisting of the curves which are not non-homotopic in them. And the fifth problem is like this. So that you consider the closure of this should be the delta 1. Oh, I forgot to put the delta 1 half delta 2 here. So it's a translate of the delta 1 of the delta 2 by this group generated by G1 and G2. The same as before, and take the closure. Then does it have a measure zero? So actually, all of these problems are already solved in the case of the two-bridge link complement. So that's the work of the Dongili and Sakuma. It's a usual. So this is a sphere. So you just consider the usual Lebesgue measure. So these 5 problems were already solved for the two-bridge link complement. So it's natural to ask if they are also true for n-bridge link complement or Heegaard splitting. Okay, so in my work, in progress, we haven't succeeded yet in proving all of these for n-bridge link complement, but we are now starting to prove some of the problems in this list. Okay. So the first result is this. So it's related to the Sakuma's problem 4. So where he asked that if there is an open set containing non-homotopy curves, is there any non-empty open set containing only non-homotopy curves in the projective major dimension space? So the theorem is like this. So actually there is. So there is an open set U in a projective dimension space in which no curves are non-homotopy. Well, this is true. If we assume that the Heegaard distance is large enough, and this is true both for N-bridge decomposition and the Heegaard split. And the bound of the lower bound of the Heegaard distance depends on only the genus of the splitting surface. Or in the case of N-bridge decomposition, it depends only on the number of puncture or number of bridge N. So genus or N complex, and N is the number of bridges or punctures. So let me just sketch the proof of this theorem. So the basic tool to prove this theorem is again the work of Namazu, or his collaboration with Minsky and Soft. So they constructed the kind of the model manifold for Heegaard splitting or N-bridge decomposition. So that is, the model is something like this. If you have a Heegaard splitting or N-bridge decomposition, where the Heegaard distance is large enough, then such a manifold is hyperbolic, and there's some model manifold constructed in a combinatorial way, and such that there is a bi-Lipschitz map from the model to the manifold, where the bi-Lipschitz constant depends only on the genus or the number of bridges. So the model is constructed from hyperbolic compression bodies. So let me explain what compression body first. So a compression body is a connected stream manifold obtained from the trivial I-bundle over surface by attaching the one handles. So it's something like this. So you have trivial I-bundles here and there. So you have two components here. And you attach one handles to make them connected. So if you have the one handle here, so they become connected. And you can add extra handles. But what you have to be careful is you can attach one handle on the upper boundary of this, but you cannot attach them in the lower part. So all the one handles are attached to the upper boundary of the I-bundles. So what you get is something like this, and this manifold have two kinds of boundaries. One boundary is which you obtain up there. So that that contains at least one handle. So that should be compressible. So for instance, in this picture, you have a compressive disk here and compressive disk there, or something like that. So there are infinitely many compressive disks. So that this boundary component is compressible. All the other boundary components are incompressible. So you have, in this picture, you have two other boundary components, one here and the other there. they are both incompressible. So we call the boundary component here the exterior boundary component, exterior boundary, and these incompressible ones are called the interior boundary. And so in this construction, you cannot get the handle body, but it's usual to regard the handle body as an example of the compression body. So we also call a handle body a special, or we regard also handle body as a special case of a compression body, where the interior boundary is empty. So let me illustrate what kind of model Nama we consider. So it's something like this. Okay, so you have a Heegaard surface or something called Conway surface that the surface splitting link into two trivial tangles. And the surface, that surface lies here. Okay. So if you cut the manifold along that surface, you get the two handle bodies or two tangle complement. And each handle body or each tangle complement is decomposed into compression bodies and handle, the finite remaining compression body actually. So this is a compression body, and this is also the compression body, and the Heegaard surface here is the exterior boundary of the compression body. So you have other kind of boundary that is the interior boundary. So you have three components in this case. Then again you have either compression body or handle body. Well, so and this interior boundary is identified with the exterior boundary of the red one. And if you have the interior boundary of this red compression body, you paste another compression body or handle body. So and you paste them. And in this case, you assume that this is a handle body and there's nothing left there. So some kind of this finite sequence of the compression body pasted together. And what you get is a handle body, because every interior boundary is killed by attaching the something below there. And what you get is a handle body. Well, in the case of the Heegaard. In the case of the bridge decomposition, well, it's also a handle body, but well, anyway, so what you get is a handle body. So the same picture appears above. You have a compression body here, and you attach them like that. And so this is a topological picture, and you put the hyperbolic structure on each part, each compression body. You consider the hyperbolic compression body, and you paste these compression bodies by using bi-Lipschitz map between the neighborhood lanes of this compression body and that compression body. So there's a systematic way to construct such a model method. Actually, some data of the meridian disks give you data on how to paste or how kind of hyperbolic streamer you have to consider. So this is what Namazi did, and so the point is that you can construct a model of Heegaard splitting or n-bridge decomposition using hyperbolic compression body as parts. So by pasting them up, you get a model. Actually, what you get is a kind of negatively curved manifold, but that negatively curved metric is very close to hyperbolic metric, and the error is bounded by the constant depending only on the Heegaard or Hempel distance. So we use that result to prove our theorem. So let me sketch a proof. So well, what we have to show is that there is some open set in which no curves are non-homotopy. So take some major lamination which can be realized. So when you consider the Heegaard splitting or N-bridge decomposition, so you have a surface S along which 200 bodies are pasted or along which two tunnel complement are pasted. So you take some major lamination on that surface such that there is a realization of that measured lamination by a printed surface. So, well, let me explain it. Explain in this picture. So you have a surface here, okay? That's the splitting surface, and you draw some lamination on this surface. And because this model is constructed from the hyperbolic compression body, you can take the lamination so that in this hyperbolic compression body, the lamination is realized as a geodesic in 3-map form. Take such a lamination. And moreover, we take the lamination so that its complement is ideal triangles. This is only possible because such a lamination is called depth zero actually, the rational depth zero, and it's proved that the lamination of the rational depth zero is kind of the open dense. So you can always take some lamination which is realized by geodesics and whose complement is ideal triangles. And what we claim is that if you take such a lamination and you consider its projective class in projective major lamination space and take a sufficiently small open neighborhood, then any lamination in that open set is also realized by the printed surface in there. So that means if you have a simple curve contained in EDCU, this curve should be realized as a closed geodesic in there. In particular, that cannot be non-homotopy. So that's actually the proof. So if once you have a model, you can see that it can be the actual manifold is approximated by model, and the model is constructed from the hyperbolic compression body, and the hyperbolic compression body has some special property that is except for something called ending lamination. Every lamination is realized, and if lambda is taken to be such a lamination, then by a model map, you see that this lamination is also realized in the original manifold M. And if you take a sufficiently small neighborhood, then every curve contained there is non-homotopy. It's not non-homotopy. Not non-homotopy. So that was the answer to the problem 4. So we prove that there is an open set in which no curves are non-homotopic in them. So the second theorem is an answer to the problem 2. What problem 2 asks is if there is a non-empty domain of discontinuity of the action of the group generated by G1 and G2. So the theorem says that actually there is. There is an empty domain of discontinuity action of the group generated by G1 and G2 on projective lamination space. Okay. And let me sketch proof again. So actually this uses the result of theorem 1. So we have already shown that there is an open set, or there's a lamination that is an open set where the node curves are not homotopically narrow. So I take such a lamination lambda. And we consider a nesting open neighborhoods UI of lambda, so that the intersection of all the neighborhoods is just 1 point lambda. And suppose that what we have to show, what we are going to show is that for sufficient large this UI should be contained in the domain of discontinuity. So the domain of discontinuity is non-negative. So the argument is by contradiction. So suppose none of them is contained in the domain of discontinuity. Then there is a sequence of the distinct elements of the group generated by G1 and G2, such that the GI UI intersect UI non-trivial. So that is the situation in the projective measure lamination space. So if you lift that situation to the measure lamination space, what you have is something like this. So that there is a lamination lambda converging to lambda, and distinct elements of the in that group G1 generated by G1 and G2, such that the translate of the scalar multiple of the lambda I by Gi converges to lambda. Okay. So if this happens, what you have is something like this. Now, so we divide that into two subcases. The first case is when the scalars Ki's are bounded. So, we call it, we are assuming that the Heegaard distance is large enough. So that means if you take two meridians, so one from the H1 and the other from H2, then the distance is large. In particular, that should be greater than 2. So if you draw the boundary of if you draw the meridians on S, then that fills up S. Because if it doesn't fills up, then you have some simple curve which is disjoint from both M1 and M2, and that means the distance between M1 and M2 in the curve complex is less than 2, less than 3. So it's contradicts the assumption. So if you take any meridians, one from the delta 1 and the other from delta 2, then the distance should be, then they should fill up S. So then that means that if you consider the translate of the M1 and M2, and if they translate if you consider the sequence of the group generated by G1 and G2, and suppose that sequence preserves M1 cap M2, then the sequence should be eventually constant after passing to some sequence. So that there can be only finitely many elements which preserves M1 cap M2 because they fill up S. So the complement is just the disks and there are only finitely way to translate the disk. So after passing to a subsequence, because we are considering the distinct infinitely many elements in the group generated by G1 and G2, so we can assume that GI-M1 or GI-M2 are all distinct. So we assume that the GI-M1 are all distinct. And we consider the limit of the GI of M1 in the projective major lamination phase. Because projective major lamination is compact. Well, if you take a subsequence, it converges to some lamination. So we use the symbol mu to denote that limit. And then you can see that this mu has intersection number 0 with lambda. Well, that's easy to show that actually here is the proof that if the intersection number is non-zero, then what you get is something like that. Okay. So here we use the assumption that Ki is bounded. So in this case, the only possibility is that mu and lambda has null intersection number. That is because we are considering lambda, which is which has rational depth 0. That means every complementary region is ideal triangles. If the intersection number is 0, that means the support coincide. Okay, so the support of mu and the support of lambda should coincide. So because the realization of lambda is so if some lamination is realized by printed surface, even after you change the measure, transverse measure, it's still realized by the same printed surface. So if lambda is realized by some printed surface, then mu should be also realized. So that means mu has the same property as lambda. So mu should have some neighborhood in which no curves are not homotopy. On the other hand, so mu was the limit of GI of M1. And M1 is a meridian. And the translate of the meridian by some element in the group generated by G1 and G2. So GI M1 is not homotopic again. So there is a sequence of curves converging to mu, which is not homotopic. But that's a contradiction. So the case 1 is finished like this. And case 2 is when Ki is unbounded. Well, then in this case it can be reduced to the case 1 easily. So instead of the GI, we consider GI inverse. Well, here we should put minus GI sub 1 is GI inverse. So that should be GI inverse. So if the Ki GI UI intersect UI non-trivially, then just consider the inverse of Ki and the inverse of GI, then what you get is something like this. So UI chap, the GI inverse, Ki inverse UI is not empty. So instead of Ki, you consider the Ki inverse. Because we are assuming the Ki is unbounded after taking a subsequence, you can assume that Ki inverse is bounded. And instead of considering the GI, you consider GI inverse, then the situation is like in the case 1. So that case is all right. So the proof is something like this. So we have proved that there is a domain of discontinuity or the action of the group generated by G1. Okay. So let me, so it's these two are all right, but in the special case where the pasting map is something special, something like iteration of pseudo-Anosov map, then you can show more. So you consider the Heegaard splitting or n-bridge decomposition like this. So you consider the Heegaard trigger or standard Heegaard splitting of the three-sphere. So you put the Handel body of genus n in a standard way in S3 and consider the complement. Then you get the another Handel body. So you get the standard Heegaard splitting of three-sphere. So let iota be the pasting map of that for that standard Heegaard splitting. And well, in the same way, we can consider that n-bridge decomposition of unknown. And you consider pseudo-Anosov map on the Heegaard surface. And we consider to trace the standard splitting of S3 by this pseudo-Anosov map. That is, the pasting map should be changed from the iota to iota, the composition of iota and n-time iteration of the pseudo-Anosov phi. Okay. And well, you consider a sequence, so then you get a sequence of Heegaard splitting indexed by n. Okay. Now, well, because only what changes with n is just a splitting map. So or splitting map, not splitting map, it's the pasting map. So H1 is constant with respect to n. So what changes is the other Handel body or the pasting map of the other Handel body. So we have a constant group G1, which is a subgroup generated by which is a subgroup of the homomorphism of H1, homotopic to the identity. So it's a subgroup of the mapping graph corresponding to the homomorphisms of H1, which are homotopic to the identity. And for each n, you have some group G2. So this depends on them. So you have some subgroup of the mapping graph group. So you have G1 and G2n. So and also you have some subset of the major lamination space, which is denoted by PD. It's a lamination, well, it's a projective lamination represented by lamination lambda such that, well, there is some constant, positive constant eta bound in the intersection number of lambda with any meridian. So it's, this one is denoted by PDH1. So the third three is something. So if you consider the Heegaard splitting obtained by the twisting of the standard Heegaard splitting by the pseudo-Anosov map, n-time iteration of the pseudo-Anosov map, then, well, the domain of discontinuity gets larger and larger than goes to infinity. And eventually it covers some set like that. So for any projective or any for R, it's for any projective lamination lambda in the complement of the G1 iota mu phi in the that space. Well, maybe I haven't defined that mu phi, but that's a ending lamination. So it's a stable lamination. So you have a pseudo-Anosov map. So pseudo-Anosov map preserves two kinds of lamination. One is stable lamination and the other is unstable lamination. And so the stable lamination is denoted by mu sub phi. And so when you consider the translate of the stable lamination marked by iota by group G1. G1 was the subgroup of the multiplex group consisting of homomorphic homotopy to the identity in H1. And consider the complement of the set defined before the PD. Then that's exactly the domain of discontinuity, or eventual domain of discontinuity. That means if you take any lamination in this set, then well, you have a neighborhood such that for sufficiently larger, it's contained in the domain of discontinuity. So the domain of discontinuity getting larger and larger eventually covers this set. So again, the proof is based on Namazi's work. Actually, this part is well, this part rather uses the Namazi Soto's research. So there's a model manifold in this case, constructed by Namazi and Soto. So what they prove that so in this case, you can construct a model manifold by two hyperbolic hundred bodies. And at the end goes to infinity, this one of the hundred body, well, corresponding to H1, converges geometrically to a hyperbolic three manifold with free fundamental group. And in that space, in that hyperbolic three manifold, the iota of the mu sub phi is the ending lamination. So that means any lamination contained here is realized geometrically. So well, they're using the kind of approximation of the manifold by geometric limit. You can show that actually this any lamination has a neighborhood which is containing the domain of discontinuity, or in which no curves are not homotopy. Okay. So the argument is similar to that of 7.1 and 7.2. And in this special case, the model is much simpler than the general one, so you just show more than general case. So that well, up to here are the results we have obtained now. So let me just say something about the project in the future. So the first problem is the systematic construction of morphism between n-bridge decomposition. So for two-bridge link groups, the work of the Onsky, Riley, Sakuma, and also the work of Lee and Sakuma, and they constructed they systematically constructed the epimorphism between the two groups. And what we'd like to do next is the same thing for n-bridge decomposition. So the point is that in the two-bridge case, well, more than our theorem one is was obtained. That's this one. So the set of the non-homotopy curve coincides with this one. And we haven't yet proved that this is true for n-bridge. So that's what we meant to show. And the second project is it's a variation of Max-Schein's identity. So Max-Schein identity is something like this. So you have one punctured torus, and you put the hyperbolic metric there. Then you get such a kind of identity. proved by McShane. So if you sum up the 1 plus exponential of the length of any curve, and the sum up these fractions, when you get the 1/2. That McShane identity. And in various situations, this identity was generalized, or there's kind of generalization or variation of the identity due to McShane himself, or Bowich, like Yoshimitsu Sakuma, Tanwon-san, and with Kani, or other people. And in particular, the Lee and the Sakuma show that there's a variation of the McShane identity for a two-bridge link complement. So the identity is something like this. So you can decompose the domain of the discontinuity of the action of the group generated G1 and G2 into two. And actually it has two components, and each has fundamental domain, and each I1 and I2, and what you get is something like this. So once you have, once we can determine the domain of discontinuity for general n-bridge decomposition, there's a possibility that such a kind of identity can be generalized to n-bridge decomposition case. So the problem is, can we generalize this identity to n-bridge decomposition? And well, I still have 2 or 3 minutes. So the third project is the point of discrete representation in the character variety. So actually, we can show that. If we consider the Heegaard splitting or n-bridge decomposition, any group or any hyperbolic manifold having that surface as a Heegaard splitting or n-bridge decomposition can be regarded as a point in the representation space of the Python-S. And so the model manifold shows is that if you take the Hilbert distance larger and larger, then eventually such a manifold converts the point in the representation space corresponding to the manifold converted to some point of the corresponding to faithful discrete representation of parameters. So such a kind of convergence should be realized some continuous deformation of the hyperbolic metric using cone manifold deformation. So actually that was done in two-bridge complement case by Akiyoshi Sakuma Wada Yamashita plus something. Well, they didn't write it down exactly, but using their technique and something plus, and you can show that. So this should be the case for in general n-bridge decomposition. So what you have to show is that there is a continuous deformation of the hyperbolic manifold having a Heegaard splitting, whose Hilbert distance grows to the infinity, and the limit is in the closure of the quasi-Fuchsian representation. So, that's all. Okay, sorry, I should stop here.